Good morning. Last week we celebrated an annual celebration that we do here for Guru Purnima, where we honor and celebrate our gurus. We hold it in the community, and I think many of you were there. It was sort of exquisite, beyond imagination of expectancy, and really beyond words, which is where we all wound up by the end of the night. And as I just sat with that this whole week, with the extraordinary love of these gurus, the way they touch us in ways that we could not cognize, we couldn't begin to ask for, we wouldn't even include it in our prayers, because we would just have no idea, and yet somehow, with their magnetism, as I watched this day unfold last week, so many devotees out there coming together, serving together, honoring the gurus, cleaning these murtis of the gurus, dressing them up, praying, chanting, singing, talking. One just had the experience of what I'm about to try and put into words. I wish I could just transport us all back there and say, just feel this, and you will know the answer to this question: do we need a guru? It just seems, even after the reading, so superfluous in a way to try and speak about it. One of the things that I read last week in preparation for Guru Day was that Sri Yukteswar had said to Master, a divine power, when he was still in India and on his way to the United States, a divine power will flow through your eyes, and it will magnetize many away from a material reality and carry them to soul consciousness. And it was very powerful to read that because, as I said then and I'll say now, many of us have been looking into the eyes in any one of these pictures that you see. The last smile over there, Master Yogananda's image on the altar behind me. There's something, you just feel like you're falling into infinity, except you're not falling. You're being just embraced and carried when you look into his eyes. So since I read that, I've incorporated into my daily practice now that each day I spend some time looking into Master's eyes in any one of the pictures that I have of him. And this morning, I was just sitting on my couch thinking about this talk, and I picked up Conversations with Yogananda. It's a beautiful picture of Yogananda on the cover. And I was just staring into his eyes. And then I picked up the autobiography of a yogi. And I opened the autobiography the way so many of us do, just what's the message going to be here? And I opened it up to a very simple chapter early in the book called The Saint with Two Bodies, where Yogananda, as a boy of 12, asked his father if he could go to Benares. He says, if I promise to come back, because he was known to try and take flight into the Himalaya. And his father said, in fact, I have a piece of business to do there, so he was going to support him to do this travel. And he sent him to Benares. He said, I need to get in touch with a business associate, but I don't have his address. But I'll send you to the ashram of Swami Kriyananda, and he'll be able to help you find him. So Master goes, and he walks in, and this saint is meditating, and the saint goes in and out of what seemed to be odd physical, not poses, but stances, like he feels leaden at some point, to Yogananda, who's only 12. Other points, his eyes are twinkling. And Master's sort of saying to himself, this is a little rude. I came here, he's supposed to be helping me. But all of a sudden, Pranavananda comes out of his meditation and he says, this man who you're waiting for, whose name I'm blocking on right now, he'll be here in 30 minutes. And Master's thinking, how does he know? And sure enough, and he goes back into meditation. In 30 minutes, he says, he's arriving. And this business associate of Master's father arrives. And as Master's talking to him, he said to him, how did you know to come here? How did you know that I needed to see you? He said, well, I was along the Ganges. I just stepped out of my bath. And Swami Pranavananda came. He was wearing these wooden sandals, and he came up to me, and he told me that your father had sent you and that you needed to see me. And Master is, of course, just, he can't believe it because he's been sitting in this saint's presence for the whole last hour. And he questions this man. This man says, are you calling me a liar? And all of a sudden, Master is touched with an extraordinary experience that he doesn't even in the chapter try and explain. But when I read that, it touched me so deeply to realize how much these great saints do for us that we would never know to think to ask for. They're there for us in ways we need, in ways we don't know we need. And they're there with so much love. There was so much love in that little chapter. Master came, he needed something. The saint not only made that happen, but taught him a lesson at the age of 12, started to show him that being in the physical body is not what it appears to be, that when you transcend all of that, you can in fact be in two places at once. But the lesson wasn't really important, nor did Master necessarily need to learn it, because after all, he came in as an avatar. He already knew these things. When he was even a much smaller boy, he's sitting in school one day, and he passes a note to one of his classmates. The note says, I am your guru. And the classmate looked at him and wrote him a note back and said, you are a naughty boy. To him, it was like taking the name of God in vain. But that night, that student had a dream. God himself appeared and showed him that, in fact, Yogananda was his master. And the next day, he came in and he bowed at his feet. Now, I say this to you just to say, there's nothing that Master lived through that he needed to live through other than to teach us lessons. But this morning, when I felt Swami Pranavananda reach out to Master in that way and make everything happen, I felt so much love for these great beings who know who we are, what we need, and who give it to us in that way. My heart started hurting. And I thought, how could this be? How could my heart hurt when I'm feeling nothing but love? And immediately I realized this is what Master means when he tells us he'll give us the experiences when we're ready. It was as if my heart could not hold all of the love in that story. It was hurting it. It was just hurting it. Even though it was filled with joy, it needed more room. And I was not really expanded enough to hold that. I realized that's what was happening to me. There's so much beauty in these stories. Master says that to have a guru is a necessity for spiritual success on the spiritual path. If one is looking on the spiritual path, that having a guru is a necessity. And guru comes from the root word, the Sanskrit root word, gur, G-U-R. It means to raise, to uplift. These are not simply teachers. These are perfectly evolved souls who have been appointed by God to come and to lead us to God realization, not to teach us from books, but to lead us there. They take on our whole burden of karma, and they open door after door after door for us to lead us to that God realization. We don't know we need to have doors open. Most of us are perfectly fine. We look around, we're living in a big world, things aren't going so well, we get a new job, we make a little more money, we have more children, we find love, we find the next love, we buy a new dress and a pair of high heels, we go out on the town, we do whatever we need to do in this tiny little space that we think is all there is. They come and they open these doors. They say, I'm going to guide you through and out of this labyrinth that you are lost in. And we don't even know it. But not every master can do that. Not every great soul. It takes those beings who have purified, roasted and toasted all of their karma in the fires of purification, who never come back and create any more karma. These fully liberated souls who could write their classmate a note at the age of 8 and say, I am your guru. And then to have it be proved. And the guru will come to us when the disciple is ready. The guru appears. We've heard that. But where are we? What are we doing? We are first living out a life based purely on karma. We're just acting and reacting. In our festival, we call this the stage of the revolt. Even when repeatedly we lost everything we had, we live like that. And then suddenly, something dawns on us. Something starts tugging on us. And we ask ourselves this question: who are we in reality? For what end were we made? And we start searching. And we're taught. And we're taught by book learning and by various teachers until finally a prayer of love goes up in wordless yearning. We as disciples realize there's so much more. We need so much more. What is that? Ever and again, through your awakened sons, the answer comes to us. Greater can no love be than this, from a life of infinite joy and freedom in God, to come back here to help us each along our path. Only the great avatars can do this. There's a wonderful story about King Bharata and his son Ramana. And the king decides at one point that he wants to know God. He awakens to it. And he calls the high priest, who's been hired by the kingdom for decades, and he says, I want you to show me God. And the priest says, but I'm a theologian. I've studied. I'm not a master. And the priest said, we've been paying you all this time. You have 1 week. You must show me God, or you'll be killed at the end of that week. And the high priest is troubled. He knows that he can't do it. But he has his son Ramana, who's thought of in this story as being not quite all there by most people. But he goes home and he's talking to his son, and he says, what should I do? And the son said, you go back to the king and you tell him exactly these words. Ramana says, if you will come and you will do exactly as Ramana says, he will show you what you are looking for. So the king says, okay. And Ramana arranges a meeting, and when he gets there, he takes the king and he ties him to a tree, really ties him down. And he takes his father and he ties him to another tree, quite a distance apart. And he says to the king, now say these words to my father. Free yourself and come over here and free me. And the high priest looks at him and says, but your Royal Highness, how can I do this? As you can see, I myself am bound. How can I help you be unbound? And the king looks at Ramana and he's furious. Get me out of this predicament, he says. And finally Ramana goes over and says, you see, this is what we're trying to show you. He who is bound with delusion cannot free somebody else from delusion. It takes a master. And that's who we've been sent. We have the great, good grace of being with a true avatar. Our job is to raise our consciousness to the point where he can work with us, where he can begin to change us, really just by showing us who we already are, which is what he wants to do. Everything I am, you are too. We have to first be loyal. Master said, you are my own. I will be here with you. I will never leave you. All I ask is that you don't deceive me and you stay loyal to me. He said, I am in your heart and I know every thought. Stay with me. You know, several days before Master died, Swamiji said to him, have you now met every disciple that was to come to you? And Master said, no, there are a few more. 2 or 3 more, he said, just a few days before he died. In those 2 or 3 days, some of Master's disciples that we've read stories about, great disciples, came to him. I will be with you till the end, he says. Just never deceive me. We have to, once we know we're on the path we're on, be loyal to it. Practice obedience. We think of obedience as something negative, something difficult. Obedience is what dissolves our ego. It's exactly, there's 2 ways to go on this path, in this life, into life or into God. Into delusion, which is ego, or into the divine, soul, unity. You remember the story of when Master gave a woman a yellow rose, and she said to him, I don't want a yellow rose, I want a red rose. He said to her, what I give you take. What was he saying to her? Dissolve your ego, open your heart to me, and I will enter and take charge of your life. And then attunement, practicing attunement. Why is it such an important concept? Because as we try to attune ourselves to these masters, we begin to understand what is God, what is the nature of the divine. Rather than being just words, we get closer and closer to these masters, and we feel, this is it. These extraordinary stories. There's a story that I heard, so many stories about how the guru's there when we're ready. But this deep love, the way we can learn about the divine and begin to learn that it's in us as well. There's a beautiful story of one of the monks at Mount Washington who was very close to dying. He was sick. And he said to one of his brother monks, you know, as hard as I've tried in my whole life, I've never been able to meditate deeply. And this monk said to him, you shouldn't even think like that. With your sincerity, with your devotion, with your service, Master will be there for you. And the monk who was dying was saddened and confused. But the next day, he said to this other brother, Master came to me last night, and he showed me the light of God. I saw God. But then I asked Master, so am I free now? And Master said to him, not yet. And then that man had one wish in his life that hadn't been granted. He was a great disciple of Master's, but he wanted his son to be on the path. And he had given his son the autobiography, and it hadn't happened. And the next day, when the son came to see him because he was leaving, he said, "Father, I want you to know that I reread the autobiography and I understand it now, and I'm going to become a disciple of Yogananda. I myself am going to become a monk." And the next day, this man died. One last wish. These masters are there. One unfinished desire. They will not let us go. And what we're trying to do is attune ourselves, open to them, let them work with us. All they want to do is to show us, you are everything I am. You are the Christ. You are me behind whatever is happening in your life, behind the kids, behind the jobs, behind the money issues, behind the loves, behind the temper, the fears. You are Christ. You are already, as we say all the time, your self-realization is already there. All you need to do is increase your knowing. And we do that by attuning ourselves to God. And how do we do that? How do we do that? Sister Gyanamata was such a beautiful example, and she kept it so simple. She kept it so simple. She wrote to Master, "On this spot where you first blessed me and let me hear Om, I keep a vase of orange roses every day." So every time she walked down those steps, there were the orange roses. And she said, anything you've ever touched in my life, anything, every picture, every bead, a stone, a rock from the walkway where you went out, I've gathered them and I've kept them. And every time I look at them, I think of you. When somebody would say to her with great excitement, "Master's coming," she would say, "He is always with me." No excitement, no change in her demeanor, because she had attuned herself completely to his presence. This is their job. They will not leave until we realize the truth. And the more we open ourselves to him, instead of, even though we lost everything repeatedly, instead of trying harder and harder with our own self, "Where are you, Master? I am going to hold you at this center of Christ consciousness until you appear to me. And any little whisper I hear from you, I'm going to take you into my heart. I'm going to look at pictures. I'm going to stare into your eyes. I'm going to walk around saying, Om Guru, Om Guru. I'm going to practice in every way I can to attune myself, because with increased attunement comes increased receptivity. Then they can come to us and bless us. There was a great saint in India who said to his disciple, I want you to go on a holy pilgrimage now. I want you to visit every holy site you can find. And that disciple stood up, and 3 times he walked around his master, and then he sat at his feet again. Where else are we going? Of course we need a guru. Of course we need a guru. Look where we are without them. We need a guru because they're going to teach us how to love, because they're going to show us who we are, because they're going to bring us together on Guru Day, so that as we serve alongside of our Guru Bhais, we begin to realize them, till by the end of the evening, there is a hushed, magnificent silence, and we sit in the divine presence of God, who appeared there. We all felt it through magnificent shrines, through our friends, through words that were spoken, through extraordinary music. Like we heard today, blessed the life that is given to God. Of course we need that. We cannot begin to do these things on our own. Do you think that monk knew that he had one last wish? Of course not. What happens? I told you about long ago I told this story because I just read it somebody who was on a game show, and the answer was AY. And when the book popped up, he knew he had to find Yogananda. We just got a letter at ananda.org from a man who's in Singapore. He put it out there for the public, so without saying his name. And he wrote this letter. He wrote it to Jyotish and Devi, and it made its way to them. He said, my life was in a shambles. I was married. I had 2 kids. We had created a magnificent life. This is just a couple weeks ago this letter came. He said, but I really undid. I unraveled my whole life. My wife left. She moved back to her country. My children left as soon as they could. I was an alcoholic. He said, I knew I needed help. I started going back to the Catholic Church. He said, I went every day. And I felt better while I was there, he said. But it wouldn't last more than a couple of hours. And he said, I knew there was something else. But every day for months I went. And I started searching online, help, basically in his own way, but in a spiritual search. He said, a picture of the autobiography of a yogi came up on my screen. And that was it. I began my search. And he found somebody in his country who could talk with him. And then eventually he took discipleship from Dhyana just a couple of weeks ago. His wife came back, his children came back. They're both on the path. It's extraordinary. We don't know these things. We have these dear friends. No matter how many times we fall, they are right there to pick us up. No matter how many times we go to judge anybody else, they remind us, look into the eyes. Those are divine beings. They're perfect divine beings. They remind us. And they remind that other person that you're divine too, that we're all just perfect. Could we do this on our own? I'm amazed that people just aren't out there going berserk in this world who don't have a guru. How could we do it without the love and guidance, the pure wisdom, the absolute, I am here with you till the end. I will come back 1 billion times if necessary. Kabir said, great is every guru, and great is the fortune of every disciple.